wanted to do a little recording of some of these techniques that I showed you because I wanted to be a little bit more specific about it and actually show you and take my time to do this demonstration. So hopefully these techniques help you, and being able to look back at this video will be a good review for you. The first thing I want to talk about is making compound shapes in Gravit Designer. So if you have two shapes in Gravit Designer, I've got these two circles right here, and they're just different colors, so you can see that there's a difference. Obviously, the orange one is on top of the green one. But what if I wanted to select them both and make a union of these two shapes together? I want them to be one piece. So what I can do is I just made a copy of it. Up here in the toolbar, this right here is compound shapes. If I hover over it, it says create a compound shape. And there's 4 different options here: union, subtract, intersect, and difference. In Adobe Illustrator, this would be your Pathfinder tool. So I'm going to click on union. Let's see what happens. It puts them together. It actually takes the color of one of them. So now the whole thing is green. But I want you to pay attention to, if I hover over them, it still looks like they're 2 different shapes. Over here in the layers panel, it actually says compound shape. It's a folder, but if I toggle it open, there's 2 different layers there. I want to flatten this so I get one flat layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the toolbar to this little tool that says convert to path, and I'm going to convert this selected compound shape into a path. When I click on that, look at what happens over in the layers. It turned it into a single flat layer as a path and not 2 compound shapes. And now I can do whatever I want with that thing. Move it around. I can change the color altogether. The next one is the subtract function of compound shapes. And what subtract does is it subtracts the top object from the bottom object by selecting both and clicking on subtract. And that's what I'm left with. Again, it shows me a compound shape over here, but I could flatten it by converting it to a path, and now I have a single path that looks like that. This is a really cool tool for doing things like, let's make a crescent moon. And now I have a crescent moon. It probably would look better if I made it a blue moon. There you go. All right, now let's look at intersect. So intersect basically allows you to create a shape from where 2 other shapes intersect. So you can see that these 2 shapes are kind of selected at the same time, and what is revealed when they're intersected is this leaf-looking shape. It's like a pointed ellipse. Looks like a leaf. If you rotated it the other way, it could look like an eyeball. That's the shape I want. And rather than having to draw it myself with the pen tool, I could actually make that shape by using 2 other shapes and taking their intersection. So once I've got those both selected, I can click on intersect, and I'm left with this. Again, if I hover over it, I can see that those the paths of those other shapes are still there because it's still a compound shape and there's still multiple layers in there. So let's just flatten it by converting it to a path. Now I have a single path and it's all good. Now I have a shape and I can make copies of it. Maybe I use that as a leaf. So there we go. The last function in compound shapes here is difference. And what this does is the opposite of intersect. It takes the difference. So if I want to remove this part where they're overlapping, I click on difference. And that's what I'm left with. There's some really cool functions that you can uncover and discover with this particular function of compound path. I want you to explore it. Again, it's still a compound shape with multiple layers. So we flatten it by converting it to a path, and now we can move it around. Let's look at clipping masks and masking with shape. Here I have a rectangle and I have a star, and I want to clip that star into the shape of the rectangle. I want the rectangle to be like a window. So I can create a clip. It basically forces one object inside another. Let's see how to do that and see what the results are. If I select both, I'm going to make a copy of them over here so you can see the original. I'm going to go up here to this create a clip tool, and what it does is it creates a mask for an object. Click on it once, and now it masks the star to the shape of the rectangle. Now, if I double click on it, I can alter the object that's on the inside. That's pretty cool. Here's another thing. Here I've got multiple rectangles that I made, and I just gave them different colors. They're all the same rectangle. I just made in different colors and aligned them. But then on top of that, see, you can see there are my layers. I put a polygon of a triangle. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a mask. It's kind of similar idea to here, but what I'm going to do is make a mask with this top object. I'll make a copy of all of it. Everything is selected. I'll move it over here. And I'm going to click on Modify, Mask with Shape, and that is the result. That's a pretty cool technique. And once I have that, I can make adjustments. I can make a copy of that. Let's transform it, flip it horizontal. Lots of different possibilities once you start to understand these different tools. Let's look at another function. This is called transform. This is in the inspector panel. If I wanted to start with a simple shape, this is just a circle. Make a copy of it over here. Click on transform, and I have these functions here where I can move it, I can scale it, I could rotate it, I could skew it. So I want to show you what it looks like if you skewed the X and the Y axis by 10 degrees and the Y axis by 30 degrees. And let's click apply, and it creates a new shape for me. That's an easy way to make that shape without having to draw it with the pen or try to get that specific correct angle with the ellipse tool. And then once I have done that, there are potentials for me to make copies of it and adjust the colors. That could be a pretty cool symbol. Here is another example of that, just using a square. I start with the square shape, and I'm going to go to the inspector panel, click transform. I'm going to skew it only by, let's see what happens if we only skew it by 10 degrees on the x-axis. Click apply, and I get a slight shift, a nice little rhombus. If I wanted to continue to edit this further, I think I could go into the subselect tool and I could modify those points further. Lots of possibilities here. So working with shapes is a great way to start your logo design. Let's look at starting with shapes. This is a little template for a logo, and it's just simple shapes. It's just polygons. So I started with 2 triangles, the same triangle actually. So there's one triangle. Let's make that a color. Start with orange. And I just made a copy of it. I'm holding down Option, clicking and dragging, making a second one that's in front of the other one. And maybe the one in the back, I changed the color to be a little bit darker because it's farther in the distance. I'm going to adjust the color on this one slightly too. And now I have a great symbol, mountains, right? If I wanted to, I could put one of those crescent moons up there. Let's do that. Let's work with shapes again. There's my circle. I'm going to start with a blue moon. We'll make a copy of that circle. We've got 2 circles up there. I'll select them both. I'll use subtract. Now I have a little moon. Convert that to a path. Figure out the right placement for that. And there is a logo. Let's look at this one. Here's another way to use shapes. This is just a polygon. So it's an actual hexagon. There's one. Let me rotate it slightly. So I've got one. I'll make it, let's make it a green color. So it looks kind of like, here we go. So now I'm going to make 2 more copies. I'll click Option and drag. Maybe I want to line it up so it lines up that way. And I'll slightly lighten that color. I'll make another one. Lighten that color again. I'm going to probably zoom in a little bit on this thing so I can get these things lined up where I want them. And now I have a simple symbol for a logo. Okay, then I would add the text onto it later. Here is another option for shapes. These are simple rectangles. Start with a 1. We'll turn it to a color. Now, when I select that object, I can adjust the corner options as much or as little as I want. I can make another copy of it. I'm holding Option and clicking and dragging. Let's make that a little bit darker. There we go. I'll make another shape right here. That's the bar of my weight. Maybe let's make that dark gray. And I'll just make copies of this that I already did. Option, click and drag. Option, click and drag. Add the text, align my shapes, and I've got a barbell. Let's look at the next technique, starting with the pen. This one is a pretty simple organic shape that I made with the pen tool. I just drew the shape of a circle because I wanted something that looked like an organic rock shape. Let's give it a color. I'm going to take off the border on it. I don't want to have a stroke on it. Maybe slightly rotate it. Then I'm going to make an extra copy of it. Maybe make that smaller. And not all rocks are exactly the same shape, so let's actually adjust that so we get some variation on that middle rock. Okay, we'll change the color. Now let's make one more for the top. I can either draw a new one, or I could work with the existing shape that I made, use the sub-select tool to adjust this, changing the anchor points, changing the handles. Change the color. And I have a little rock cairn stack. Pay attention to the order that you have them in. I'm going to flatten this one a little bit and rotate it. There we go. It's another good way to start the logo. This one I took a little bit of time with, but you get the idea. Here is a little butterfly, a natural organic shape. I made this with a pen. I just created one wing first. And with a simple pen tool. There's one side of the butterfly. Let's make it a color. We will take off the border. No stroke. And slightly lighten that. Now, what do I do now? I make a copy of that. So I'll click Option and drag to make a copy. Then I'm going to right click. I'm going to transform this, flip it horizontal, and rotate it, flip it the other way. And I'll just slightly adjust it, move it over, line it up. I could keep it both the same color, or I could change the tone, the value slightly. So I get one side looking darker, one side looking lighter. That gives it a little bit of depth and dimension. There's a butterfly. Here's another style of logo that you could make with the pen tool. This is kind of an L shape. It's for my name, but you could make any shape that you wanted. I just drew it as a loop. Simple shape. We'll go up there and let's put a border on it. It's already got a black border, but let's increase that to 10. I'm going to go in here and maybe smooth out this line a little bit. There we go. Let's change that border color to something else. And now let's actually soften the edges of that path by going to Advanced Border Settings. We're going to go to the ends and change them to a round end cap. Automatically that looks better. Now I'm going to use the Advanced Border Settings and I'm going to add some end graphics to these. Really simply, it's the end arrow and start arrow function. So under borders, I'll click on Advanced Border Settings. And for the start arrow, I will choose a circle. And I'm going to change the percentage to 60%. Makes it a little bit smaller. And on the end arrow, I'm going to change it to a circle. We'll leave it at 100%. And now I have a pretty cool little symbol. There we go. Add text to make it an iconic combination logo. One more technique that I want to show you, and that is how to start with the freehand. This star was simply created with the freehand tool here. And then I added text later. So here we go, freehand. I'm just gonna draw a simple shape of a star. And now that I have that drawn, I can actually go in here and I can make adjustments to these lines if I wanted to. I want to get rid of the border. I want to change the fill color to something else. Actually, if I keep the border on it and increase the border to make it the same color, you can go in here and start to manipulate these and change the shape. I can drag this down, make that side a little bit smaller. There's lots of things that you can do to begin with just the freehand tool. I think that I might have actually used a rounded, yeah, I did that. I changed the type of joint to round off the edges. There we go. And then I added text. This needs some further work down here. I would zoom in and I would maybe make adjustments here to make that look a little bit smoother. Let's move on to this one. Here is basically the two little mountain scene and the moon, something similar to what I created up here, but I just did it with the freehand tool. So I did a simple line here. I took out the fill, increased the border weight. Let's change the end cap design. There we go. So as the position of the end cap needed to be changed. And then I can do the same thing again, another line right here. Maybe I change this one to a different color. And then I put a little simple ellipse here to make the moon. I like a really big moon. Let's make that moon a pretty yellow color. Only got to take off the border. Add your text and you have an iconic logo. This is the last one, and this is just creating a symbol using a symbol of a letter using the freehand tool. And I simply just drew a circle. Maybe I need to soften some of these lines a little bit. Oops, sorry, I want to go to the sub-select tool to manage the individual points. Take out the fill, change the border weight. Use a border color. And let's add that Q. It's a little bit too much, just a straight line here. Go to Advanced Border Settings, change the end caps, and I have a shape there. But again, I can continue to modify this by making any adjustments that I want to on it. If I wanted to vectorize the border, it turns the whole thing into a shape. Now I've got two pieces. I have that piece and that piece. So if I select them both, I could use the compound path Using union, I can merge those two shapes together, convert the whole thing to a path, and now I can manipulate it even further as a single object. All right, I hope some of these tips were helpful for you guys. I wanted to make sure that you knew that there were lots of different ways to accomplish creating a symbol for your logo, and have these techniques at your disposal, ready to call upon when you need them. All right.